All in favor?
Aye.
It's all yours.
Okay, moving on. The roll call we have here, Anton, Jonathan, myself, and Kelly are in attendance. Tim, Kennedy, and May Aerosmith Aku are not here today. So the first item on the agenda is open forum, where anyone that would like to could come up, introduce themselves, and you'd have 5 minutes to have the mic.
I opted for that. Just let me turn
No
it
one
up.
is entertaining that, then we will move on. The first item is approving the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda from last council meeting.
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So now we're going to go over the 2017 audit review. We do have auditors on the phone, and I guess if the auditors would care to start off with any comments at this time.
Okay, Cheryl,
Yes.
it's your turn.
Okay, Bill's going to be talking.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Bill Paulson. I'm a partner with Walker, Giroux, and Hani. I'll just start off by running through the report. It's 70-some pages, so I'll just try to help you understand where everything is and hopefully what some of the numbers mean. Starting on page 3, I should ask, do you have copies of this that you're following, or
Yes.
Yes, we do.
winging
We do.
it?
They've got copies.
Yep.
Okay. So page 3 is, you see at the top of the page a paragraph called our opinion. Our opinion says that the financial statements present fairly. So basically it's what we used to call an unqualified opinion, which is what you would want, saying that the financial statements present fairly the activities and the position of the city. The next section is management discussion and analysis. Basically, that's not part of our audit. It's a requirement to have that in there, but it's really information that is the city of Grand Marais' management. So I'm going to kind of skip over that for the audit purpose, but for all practical purposes, there's a lot of good information in there. Encourage you to read through it. Then you get to page 13, which is the basic financial statements. You'll see on there the statement of position, governmental activities and business types. We used to call it the balance sheet, but basically it shows you the cash, receivables, property, all of the assets of the city in different categories. The governmental activities are separate from the business activities, which are basically the enterprise funds or proprietor funds. I think it's easier to understand if you skip over to page 16. You'll see the actual balance sheet with the breakdown of the general fund, debt service fund, public works, capital project, and then the other governmental funds. column labeled other governmental funds basically consists of the smaller funds, and there's a better detail of that if you want to know exactly on page 62. It'll show the breakdown of all those, what makes up the other funds. Basically there you see, again, all the cash balances, the receivables. The only thing that isn't there, I think, are the fixed assets and debt. Okay. Again, I think just touching on some of the highlights, cash balance, $5,769,000 in the combined. Strong cash balance for you. And also fund balances are at $5,755,000. Again, I think strong fund balances for all of the governmental funds. Page 18, you see the revenues broken down for those same fund categories. The first column, again, general fund, showing property taxes, $700,000, etc. More detail for that, if you went to page 64 and 65, you'd see the breakdowns of revenues and expenditures with more detail. Then you have the debt service, public works, capital project fund. That was a fund that had a lot of activity, a lot of dollars spent on construction and progress, and also some debt was issued to help pay for some of that project. And then the other governmental funds, more detail again if you flip to page 63 if you're interested in more detail of those smaller governmental funds. Page 20 shows basically the balance sheet of the proprietary funds, enterprise funds. The four listed are the liquor store, electric, enterprise, water, and sewer funds. Again, I think very strong cash balances in all your proprietary funds. Very good thing. If you flip to page 21, you see the revenue and the operating expenses for each of those funds. Again, strong operating income for each of them, except for the sewer enterprise fund did have a deficit. But overall, again, they all have strong cash positions, and from an operating income standpoint, even the sewer fund, even though it has a loss, an operating loss, there's $141,000 of depreciation in that fund, which is a non-cash flow item. So it's still producing positive cash flow, building cash reserves that can be used for basically for property replacement in the future. So doing a good job with that. The next section are the notes to the financials. statements, once again, a ton of information in there, showing cash by categories. Page 34, you see capital assets. I think the largest thing we show there under additions of capital assets are construction in progress. That increased by 3,809,000. So some significant public works and utility projects going on. Should be finished, and then that construction in progress will move to the improvements and infrastructure, I suppose, probably next year when they're completed. Page 39 shows, I think, an important schedule. It shows your long-term liabilities, listing basically the cash requirements to pay all the debt. Starts out by year, and then it's by 5-year increments. Again, broken down between government funds and the proprietary funds. I don't see any real problem with cash flow meeting those at this point, so that looks like it's in good shape. A lot of the footnotes talk about pension liabilities. One of my favorite things is the para deficit. Basically, the fund itself is underfunded. I think it's on the government-wide, shows the liability. Okay. Yeah, page 13, the government-wide shows a net pension liability of $1,238,000. Kind of an unusual situation where Terra, and I guess it's also part of the fire.
That's apparent too.
But anyway, that's an actuarial number provided by the actuarial for para. I believe the statewide deficit was something like $6 billion, and the 1 million represents Grand Marais' portion of that deficit based on a whole bunch of assumptions, and it did reduce this past year. I think it went from 8 billion down to 6 billion based on earnings, and I think the stock market did better. But anyway, that's a lot of the footnote disclosure. Those are required by GASB. They're very labor intensive and a lot of information there. I really don't think I want to get too involved with that, but just so you understand the reason for it, and it's not a liability that you have a scheduled payment due. You just make your regular payments for payroll liabilities, and hopefully it'll take care of itself over time. But anyway, that's what that's about. Then some of the other detail that I mentioned, page 62 has the non-major governmental funds, which consist of the library special revenue fund, cable, storefront renovation. Basically those three And then page 64 is a lot more detail of the general fund revenues, showing breakdowns of all the taxes, intergovernmental revenue, and charges for service. Page 65 has the same information for the expenditures, so it just has more detail than just large categories. Then we get to our auditor's reports. First one is the report on internal control over financial reporting. I think the easiest way would be to turn to page 69. That shows the prior year findings, and then page 70 shows the current year, which basically have the same findings. The first one is segregation of duties. That's a very common finding with smaller governmental units. The second one is lack of control over financial reporting. That's speaking to the fact that we prepare the report for you to meet all the requirements of GASB. And the third item was collateral requirement. The legal requirement requires that you have 10% over the FDIC insurance in collateral, and you had everything fully collateralized, but it wasn't over 10% over the FDIC coverage. So that's just something that would impact you if the bank failed, just not being collateralized according to the requirements. Maybe the management letter on page 73 would also be of interest. The first one deals with that collateral issue. The second one deals with the liquor store inventory. Just pointing out that the gross profit was down significantly. Not sure if it had to do with the inventory counts or, potentially it could be an indication of some inventory disappearing too. So just something that I think needs to be brought to your attention and monitored going forward. Number 3 again has to do with the inventory counts. Just, helping have written instructions and detailing what needs to be done with that. The fourth item, dealing with bids and quotes. We noted that copies of the original bid documents were not maintained at City Hall. Even though a lot of times your city and the engineers involved will have that, you should have copies of that on hand. Fifth one, city received donations in February for some park benches. They didn't get deposited until July. Just another case to reduce the risk. They should be deposited sooner, quicker. And we noted employee leave reports included some terminated or retired people, so those need to be updated to eliminate those. Does anybody have any questions? I have Cheryl here. She'll have all the answers.
I had a question about the collateral requirements.
Are you there?
You gotta
Yeah.
speak up, they can't hear you.
Is it all the way over there? Okay. On the collateral requirements section, is that, does that notification have repercussions, or is it just gonna keep coming up until we address it?
The collateral, I think the issue had to do with some of the bank employees were new and weren't monitoring that. I understand that's been corrected, but I don't know currently if that's the case. But again, somebody internally from the city should be following up on that and making sure it's being done.
Okay. Anything else?
No. I don't.
Not I.
Okay. Well, I think unless you have anything else to add, we appreciate your time and we're gonna move on.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Cheryl.
Okay, thank you.
Are we good?
Yep.
We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question as far as the management letter and some of the 6 points that they addressed in there. Do we have anything in place? Have we talked about whether administratively in the office or at council well, probably not council previously because this is when we're first hearing it, as to how to put corrective action or if we can put corrective action in place?
Which one do you want to talk
Okay, I'm gonna try to put you on speaker.
about? That was unpleasant.
Probably worse for us.
Well, I mean, all 6 of them, I guess, and not that we have to have something tonight, but I would like to see them be addressed back to us, whether, we're not able to do something because of staffing shortage. Number 2, have we changed what we're doing there? 2 and 3 kind of go together as far as physical inventory count. Whether it's a month, 6 weeks from now that we hear at a meeting, just an update of where we're at with these points.
Sure.
If we're able to address them.
Yep, we can do
If
that.
we're not. I think number 2 and 3 obviously is really important.
Yeah. Has Chris addressed that at all? I mean, has he talked about that? I mean, about the liquor store inventory and those differences? I mean, as far as,
Or is he aware of it?
Is he
We're
aware
just
of
getting
it?
it tonight.
well, we've had this.
This
so-
isn't the first.
Okay.
Yeah. We've had this report for a couple months now. You've
Okay.
had it for a couple months now. We'll make sure that you get a report back on that stuff, and including from all the appropriate people involved in it.
That would be
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Is there anything else we'd like to add? No? Moving on. We have Zeph Energy and Arrowhead Cooperative with regards to a electric car charging area. So, welcome you to introduce yourself and
Good evening. I'm Yusef Forrest. I'm the Member Services Manager at Arrowhead Cooperative. And I'd just like to say thanks for your consideration of this project and thanks for borrowing Mike's time to us on this project.
Yeah, and my name's Jim Goodman. I'm with Zeph Energy. I'm a project developer.
So I said in the memo, the PUC's been working on this project. This is Arrowhead's development of these sites around the county, and they wanted to have one in Grand Marais, and the PUC was excited to be a part of it, so we've been negotiating back and forth on that. There's an agreement that the PUC will have to have with Arrowhead that talks about payment and ownership and things like that, but this agreement is about site control, and the location is on city-owned property, so that would have to be between the developer, Zeph, and with the city council.
Yep, and correct that the city doesn't have liability responsibilities or financial responsibilities for this project. It's just site. Is that correct?
The PUC is contributing $21,000 towards the project.
Okay.
So, other than that, we don't.
And after the
have an
fact.
ongoing, other than just what we would normally do on that piece of property.
Okay.
And we'll receive a small payment back for the use of it.
Yeah, although I don't believe the Utilities Commission is counting on a lot of return
No.
that way. I mean, this
I
is
don't either.
Arrowhead and the Grand Marais PUC both kind of see this as a way to support the electrification of transportation in the community, and that's good for the business model, but it's also just good for the things they're trying to accomplish. This will make it easier for folks to have electric vehicles in the community.
And that, I mean, I'm right that 15 North Broadway is here.
That's here.
So-
So across the parking lot over here, we have some electric infrastructure in place already. There's a couple of boxes over there. And that kind of makes it a perfect spot for the installation of these sites, and the location is downtown, which makes it a desirable spot for Zeph, for Arrowhead, so.
I don't know if it's jumping ahead or not, but based on other conversations we've been having about the future of this location,
Yeah, that's the issue. Otherwise, this would have been a much easier conversation, but, made me nervous because we're talking about 2 or 3 years from now, this site potentially having a very different use, and we don't know. And we're making this as a 7-year site use license. So the way we dealt with that is in the license, we say that we'll find a suitable alternative location if we do decide that they have to move.
right?
And hopefully then Arrowhead will partner with us in that relocation.
We're very excited about this partnership, so thank you for that.
Okay. Yeah, is there anything else you guys wanted to add about it, or
I would just,
is there I don't know if I caught any sort of rollout on things, like when things are gonna start up, or if you started?
yeah, I can talk about the timeline, at least in general terms. Once this license agreement is completed, Mike and I will finish, drafting the memorandum of understanding between PUC and Arrowhead. And once that's in place, we'll order equipment, and we're hoping that all that can happen yet this fall. And we'll have the equipment installed before the end of the year.
Okay. And you're talking off the south parking lot there, kind of along that stretch of existing parking, not
Yeah,
off the curb front here?
right. So in
Gotcha.
that parking lot, it's maybe the 3rd and 4th in from the alley on the
Okay.
other side of the lot, adjacent to the grassy area.
Okay. How many vehicles is it one? In that equipment? Is it a
It's
single
actually-
vehicle, or is it multiple vehicles, or?
It's actually 2 chargers.
Yeah.
One's a direct current fast charger, and the other one's a level 2 kind of a medium kind of speed charger. So at any one time, you could be charging 2 cars at once.
Cool.
So we've been, negotiations ongoing. Some of the things that are in here have gone back and forth a little bit in the couple of days this week that, since we sent you the packet at the end of the week last week. Chris and I are satisfied with how it reads now, and so is Zeph. So the changes had to do mainly with the conversation about payment. We don't need to be paid monthly. It's just going to be an annual payment. And then the removal language, we have the right to take what action we need if there's some sort of safety hazard to the public there, and if the equipment needs to be removed, Zeph will be doing the removal of it. We're not anticipating any of that happening. We are fully expecting this to go 7 years, whether it's at that site or an alternative site. And this is a pilot program, so we're really just trying to learn about it.
Okay.
So for this, there's no resolution, it's just the license agreement?
Yep.
Correct?
I'd make a motion in support of the license agreement between the city PUC and all parties involved.
So this will just be the city granting a license to Zeph.
Okay. Gotcha.
I will second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We're excited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're 5 minutes ahead of schedule.
Keep it up. You got this.
All right. Don't lose it yet. Next, we have a county transportation plan with Kristen, engineer, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors, Administrator Roth, city staff, and members of the public. I'm pleased to finally have the chance to take the time to introduce myself. My name is Kristen Poster, and I am the new Cook County Highway Engineer here in town. And I'm here tonight with a twofold purpose, one being to introduce myself. I'm here 2 to 3 days per week in Grand Marais. We're always open for questions at the highway department, whether it be myself or my coworkers up there. So if you have any questions this evening, I'm happy to answer them. I can't promise I've learned everything in my first 6 months, but we will get back to you if I'm not able to answer questions about the highway department tonight. So in addition to introducing myself, I'm also here to announce Cook County's transportation planning effort. Over the course of the next year, in cooperation with ARDC, Arrowhead Regional Development Commission, Cook County will be working on a long-term transportation plan for our system, not limited to the streets that we manage in town, but also all of our county highways throughout Cook County. Our goal is to create a long-term 20-year vision for the Cook County transportation system. This plan will address multimodal components. It will be data-driven with performance-based objectives, and over the course of the next year, we will have multiple public outreach opportunities as we start to move forward with this planning effort to learn what's most important to the users of the system here in Cook County and the city of Grand Marais. All that said, I'm here tonight to ask if the city would be interested in participating on the county's steering committee for this effort. We will have a steering committee that meets monthly or every other month to work very closely with ARDC and guide the direction of this plan moving forward. And Administrator Cadwell and the county board and I would very much welcome city participation if you are interested.
I know I am, but I don't know what you think about that, Kristen.
It's a council decision.
Okay.
It's absolutely a council decision, no matter who the councilors are or related to.
I just know that I have just one thing that I'm currently part of, and I know other people have much fuller plates than I do, so it's also something that does interest me.
Great. You want a motion on that, or just say go? I think it's great if you want to do it. I mean, I think representation is important.
I do too.
I think you being able to provide feedback from meetings. I've been on the ARDC with the Sawtooth Bluff project and being able to bring stuff back that we've learned from that, and I think it's helpful to have the city's voice in that. So
I think especially going forward as we talk about state-maintained roads that we have downtown and all the things that we have going on between the city and county that need to take place, I think it's really important that we have a voice and can work with them. So if that works for you guys, and
it's great.
Do you want to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to appoint Kelly.
I would second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I will abstain.
None opposed.
If you don't mind, I'll probably hang out with you in those meetings too.
I suppose.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Swearingen and Administrator Roth. We will absolutely be in touch.
It's awesome. Looking forward to hearing about it.
And I know you have next Friday, September. I'm so sad yet that you're meeting at, okay.
Yep.
How are
Yeah,
you-
we'll send the dates over to Mike here tomorrow.
Okay.
And as far as like the public outreach for involvement, those will be like, how are you planning on getting that out, like radio or?
Yeah, Councilor Mooney, we have not set the public involvement schedule specifically yet.
Yeah.
We know there will be opportunities throughout Cook County, including here in Grand Marais, as we get rolling. And after next week's or the week after, when the steering committee meets in the first couple of weeks to really come up with the specific plan moving forward. I do monthly interviews on WTIP, usually the second week of every month. I'm on the North Shore Morning Show, so you will probably hear about it through WTIP, Cook County board meetings. The Cook County's Public Information Department will be releasing more information. The county Facebook page, it will be well shared
Great.
when we have that schedule set.
Awesome.
But that probably won't happen until later this fall.
Okay. Great.
Can I ask a sidebar question? Where are we at with talking about winter snow plowing routes, parking, all of that? Has any of that started discussion?
If you mean, have we mentioned it to each other? Yes, absolutely.
I'm sure you have.
If you mean, have we actually sat down and hammered it, how it's gonna work so that everybody can do what they need to do? Not yet, but that's something that we wanna do. If we get a chance to sit down in the next couple of weeks, then we'll get something in front of you.
Okay.
Yes, Administrator Roth has brought that to my attention, but I wasn't going to make that my first order of business in introducing myself to the community. But Mike has been in touch. We will follow up.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank
for
you very
coming.
much.
Thank you.
Now you're
Okay.
15 minutes ahead of time.
I'll go slower.
No, it's okay.
No need.
So, for the planning commission report, I think usually Tim would kind of run that.
Well, I go to the planning commission
Do you
meetings
wanna-
too, so I'm happy to fill in what I know, and this first item, I don't think you really need any update on this ordinance you saw last month, or last meeting, and this is just the second reading.
Second reading.
Yep.
So after you do that, then we have to publish it in the newspaper, it becomes official. There's a transaction that's, this is a contingency for, so if you do pass it, then I'll just be sending some notice for closing schedule for tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
So, as a continuation from the last meeting, I would entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2018-01.
I so move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ordinance passes.
Okay, this next one's a little more complicated. So first things first, procedurally, Anton can't participate in this conversation, obviously, since this is his item. We're a little short on city councilors this evening, so a person might wonder, how are the two of you going to be able to handle this? I did check with Chris beforehand just to be sure, but a quorum of the council, 3 of you are a quorum, so you're legally able to hold a meeting. This is an item where a simple majority of a quorum is all it's required to pass. So it will take both of you to vote in favor of this for it to pass. If you split votes, it doesn't pass. But if it's 2-0, even though that's less than half of the council, it's not less than half of the people that are here tonight. So that is adequate. So that just procedurally, that's how we can look at this.
Okay.
So do you answer questions for us, or can Anton answer questions for us?
So Anton is no longer sitting on the council for this conversation. He is the applicant, and he can answer questions. And then I'll also answer any questions that you have about the meeting. There's a memo in here that describes how that meeting went and some of the things that came up, and then also the particulars about the preliminary plat and some of the issues that we have with it, and also what will come next if you're moving forward on this.
Well, Anton, would you care to just give a brief overview of of the whole development?
Yeah, so we have been working for a couple years, probably it's been 4 years ago, I bought some property on the north side of the Gunflint Trail right above town, and developed those into buildable sites and homes. And in the process of doing that, had to run power and fiber up from down by the business park. And so as we looked at where we would go next, I looked at money that I'd already spent in infrastructure development and contacted property owners that owned the parcel here, this block 22 of the Blackwell Edition, which is adjacent. Would be the west side of the initial property purchase that I'd made. And so, yeah, I was looking at what we could do with that property. So before I purchased the land, we got survey work done and a wetland delineation done, so we knew what we were getting involved with. Also had conversations with Tom from the sewer and water department, and haven't talked as much with the electrical, but that's because I know where that's at, because I brought it up there, or helped contribute to getting it up there. And then talking with Mike too about how best to utilize the property. The challenge versus, I mean, it's been platted since 1912, and so it's been platted for a long time. The city, there's a ditch that runs in where 2nd Avenue West is, or would be if it was built out. But that is a ditch that was put in and then drains underneath the Gunflint Trail into the city ditch that runs above, like, the football field and the practice fields there at the high school. So as far as, looking at the classic grid pattern of how a city block is laid out, it makes it pretty hard to access the lots, what would be to the east side of the city block. But it also in some ways gave me an opportunity. I've looked at other city blocks and trying to figure out how we could do that, and without asking the city to come in and push in city water, sewer, curb, gutter in a classic grid format. If you were to try and do that as a private individual to service a full block, you're putting in 2 blocks worth of infrastructure, sewer, water, and you're basically servicing, the people that own the other side, the blocks on the opposite side. So this, because of the ditch that exists, again, with lots of back and forth on ideas and how many lots we could get with the wetlands, the plat drawing that you have of Charlie's that's on there is the iteration that we've gotten to. I think at one point we were up at 10 and sites, which if it was a classic gridded city block, you'd have 20 lots to meet the size requirements. You would get 10 buildable lots out of that. Of course, that's a perfect square rectangular world, and that is not Cook County or Grand Marais. So we initially had talked about, one of the thoughts was, instead of running up 2nd Avenue West because of the ditch that's been built there, to run up, basically flip-flop and run up the proposed, what now is a proposed vacated alley, running right from the Gunflint Trail north up to 9th Street, widening that to be the right-of-way for the street, and then that would service both to the left and to the right of that. During the double check by both the DNR and the county for wetlands, in the county right-of-way, they discovered a plant which is only in 2 places in the state of Minnesota, and
We're one of them.
and it's right there. And so the DNR did a full survey of the property to make sure that it wasn't something that drifted down, and like I had, Fern Gully or something up there with this special place, and it wasn't found anywhere else on the property. So the original idea, because where the sewer stubs, sewer and water stubs are in the apron on 3rd Avenue West, our original plan was to run down the right-of-way along the Gunflint and tie in. We had enough depth there to be able to actually run the sewer and water downhill and tie in. But if we did that, we'd dig up that plant, and we also would have changed the hydrology around it. So this idea of keeping using the existing apron as it sits on 3rd Avenue West and using that as our opportunity to swing into the property, avoiding the wetlands, and running up, and it's still ending up basically in that same location as where the straight shot through would ended up.
So with having that plant there, would that mean that as a city, we could not create, if we wanted to, a full 3rd Avenue West?
Well, it's actually, the plant is just to the south. There's the Lot A, Outlot A.
Yep.
It's right basically, right south of that in the
Okay.
county. I mean, and it's been there since they seeded when they put the Gunflint Trail in. It was probably in the seed mix, is my guess. And the only reason it didn't get mowed down, for them to be able to find it, was because we had survey stakes out from the previous year, and the mower didn't want to knock out our survey stakes, so they left that tall, and then they found the plant. So it's resilient though, because it's been mowed for 10 years and it keeps coming back. So, but anyway, that's fine. You know, we want to do what we need to do.
Yeah.
So that's basically what got us in the route that we have now. Of course, trying to add a street in the middle of a city block takes away from what your size is, which is how we went from initially like goals of maybe 10, so we can try and keep actual lot development costs spread out over 10. We were able to just go to 8, and then also looking at, and I've talked with the adjacent property owner to the west there about vacating 3rd Avenue West north of, well, you can see where that jog is there. So 3rd Avenue West would still be what it is. It would still access if they wanted to. They don't have access off that side, but the Smiths and then the Cook County, there's a tax forfeiture parcel there. So we would actually be putting in city sewer and water up to that tax forfeit parcel, or up to it, so they could tie in. That would be part of the engineering that would happen. And then the agreement I have with Fritz is to run more connections of sewer and water up past, so that if he decides to develop, he's 150 feet closer to do that. So that's just something that he and I are working out. So obviously it's a sweep. It's not a straight road. I think for some reasons that makes it nicer. I think if we had plowed that alley all the way through, if there wasn't that plant there, and that, it would be a much more direct route, kind of back and forth, and worrying about the hill and worrying about, I think the curving aspect of the road will, hopefully control the speeds, and I'm sure that people will use it as a cutoff instead of running all the way over to 4th and heading up. Yeah, let's see.
So does that become that's a city road?
Yeah.
That's his intention, is for this to be a public.
Yeah.
So do you have to do the engineering of it, or is that something that we get involved in the building of it?
So I'm paying for the engineering and the construction of both the road, the stormwater, and all the utilities.
So it has to meet.
And so that has
specs.
to meet right. I mean, that's one of the early on conversations that I had with Mike, was that even if I were to keep it in private roads the goal for me is not to own 8 houses on this block.
Right.
The goal is for me is to build houses and sell them.
Right.
So when, because if it was me while I'm doing it, if I have to maintain it, right, if that makes sense. But roads tend to go from private to public, but they never go from public to the other way around. So everything in the plan on this is to build out for the understanding that even if we were, what's the point in keeping it private if we're just it would turn public anyways? Let's just build it out the right way. So, and it's a gravel surface. It isn't pavement. It isn't curb and gutter. It's, the stormwater will be surface stormwater, and I'm sure there'll be catchments, and that's what I pay the engineers for.
And any qualified civil engineer can do the design for this. We're going to be a lot more concerned about the choices they make, since it'll be owned by the public. We may have to have our engineers do a review for us that we would ask the developer to pay for. That still might be the cheaper option than just hiring our engineers in the first place. So how this gets built, the actual design of it, is something that would occur between the preliminary and the final plat approval. And one of the reasons why you do a preliminary plat and then a final plat is to give a developer some assurances in order to spend the significant amount of money that it's going to cost to do the design work, to figure out how to do the water, sewer, and street construction.
I did not get to watch all of the planning and zoning meeting. I started and wasn't unable to finish. What kind of concerns did you have coming out of the neighborhood? I know there was issues about people not getting notice either. I saw as part of the zoning, but did you have?
And I thought that was part of it, but with a preliminary plat, that isn't something that happens. It's more like in a conditional use permit or variance. That's where neighbors are alerted. So I was surprised. I'd actually just called Fritz randomly that day to see if he was going to come to the meeting or talk to him about and he's like, I didn't get anything. And then when the Smiths showed up, they said they didn't get anything, and that isn't part of it, right?
Okay.
But I didn't know that. I just assumed I hadn't been to the mail, so I thought I just didn't, because I'm an adjacent property owner to the east there, and so.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't get all the way through the
And
part of the tape.
I mean, I'm not on that side as far as opening up, but I mean, if you guys have anything, what other comments, if I'm not saying things?
No, I think there's still the concern that the neighboring community has no awareness at all of plans, and I understand your rules and regs, or however you want to say it, that you don't need to send out at this point, but I think there's a huge unawareness in the neighborhood of this happening, and I guess, again, the concern is the road, since it's a dirt road, that we are in the city now, and we don't get any calcium chloride put down on the road, and it's a very busy road because of livelihoods in and out of what they do. And it is a concern, I know, of ours, to have another road going in and out, and then exactly what the properties are going to be selling for, to increase our tax base up there.
Or if it will increase our tax base. And I guess I'd like to know that if you're gonna start selling let's say a square footage house is same as mine for $200,000 and $300,000, is my property tax is gonna go up as well.
Yeah. So we have concerns, definitely.
You probably didn't mean that to be a rhetorical question, but I hope you understand how complicated it would be to answer tax value based on speculative future home construction. So I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question.
Yeah. I'm sure Anton must have a ballpark idea of what he wants to put up in square footage, and what's he gonna want for the building, for the homes.
Yeah, and everything based on, again, because of the sizing, and it is, like on the first chunk of property that I bought 16 city lots, and those have 3 houses spread out over 6 lots. And so, and there was much less infrastructure work involved in getting those in, because those are right adjacent, right off the Gunflint Trail. It was a matter of tying into stubs and a little bit of extra with 2 of them. And the goal here is, because of topography, because of our desire to keep the costs down, for one, so that more people can afford them. I mean, I'm not doing, this is a business thing.
Yep.
So I mean, I have to go where the market is too. But the house sizes are 800 to 1,200 square feet as a maximum footprint size for homes, or that just because of the ones that we've done, the ones that have had the most success are in that 1,200 square foot range, and that makes the most sense topography wise. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't. I know that there's blasting involved now. That we always had some idea there might be some blasting, but because we did geotechnical analysis on this with drilling, like we have a better idea, but this has been multiple years too. So even estimates on, I don't know how much I'm going to sell the houses for.
Yeah, you gotta get all your costs together and then
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yep.
I know that
But
I'm a bit excited about it, truthfully, knowing if somehow it's in the 200,000 range, roughly, or even a little less, I know that I'm excited.
It won't be less.
It won't be less.
Well, based on
Costs.
what I mean, so part of the issue is like, if it's the city were to put in, I mean, this goes into a whole other thing that I've said.
Right.
You guys maybe haven't been here to listen to me ramble on about it, but if I'm putting infrastructure in, I can't put an assessment on these properties that people pay me back at a certain interest
Right.
rate over a certain amount of time.
Yep.
So I have to recoup not just the land,
I hear you.
right? I have to recoup what it costs me to do all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So because of my crew size and our workload, it isn't like I'm going to go and build 8 houses in 1 year and be sitting on all that. It's going to be spread out. I mean, we're pretty
You
stuck on
don't
doing
watch
it.
HGTV, they do it in an hour.
24
I know.
hours.
It's actually like 52 minutes with commercials, yeah.
I'm still
So-
somewhat excited, knowing how we struggle to find housing in the community, knowing that, at least some of our professionals, hopefully, be it teachers, be it courthouse staff, be it hospital staff, would have the ability. I know for me, granted, my house was much cheaper at 966 square feet when I bought it 14 years ago. My proudest moment was buying a home and giving my child a home. So I think for other people to have that ability in this community, that's something that I want to see. If this allows it somehow, I don't know what it will be, depending upon your numbers, what's going to happen. If you're working at a convenience store, at a grocery store, at a hotel, some of these places, that's going to make it tougher. But again, it may open up for some others, whether it's Border Patrol, different things. I am somewhat excited that we have some opportunities to do that. And I know we've been talking about this since I've been here, and I'm sure far beyond, and I know it's very large on the community's mind as far as having homes available to people. So I say hats off to you for trying to figure out some sort of way to provide some of that.
Thanks.
But I get that there are questions, within the neighborhood and how people feel, and part of living here and trying to afford to live here is one of those things that people worry about, like all the rest of us. So,
Other questions that came up at the public hearing were particular design issues, like how wide is the road going to be? There is a suggested road width on here, but that's not really, we're not there yet. I think that we're going to have something to say about that, first of all, but we also just need to see what an engineer's opinion is for a appropriate road size to get that curve up that hill and handle the traffic. There was questions about how runoff's going to be handled, and there's a concept that Anton has, but again, we really need to see the engineered plans to understand how that's going to happen, and then make sure that we're confident in it.
So with our stormwater plan and all that we have, the engineering, would you be able to
You could run that as a model.
use this and run it?
Mhm.
That's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
It'll be
And
helpful.
you haven't done any stormwater studies at this point? That's
No, because
future.
yeah. That's part of the next step
Yep.
of the engineers.
And there was concerns, and you already heard about traffic issues in the neighborhood already, and I think everybody was fairly certain that this road, if it's public, is gonna be used by more than just the people that live adjacent to it. So that's something that needs to be considered when the design is happening. Then there's some particulars about the plat itself where it doesn't meet our specifications. The biggest one in my mind is that the right-of-way that's drawn here is 50 feet wide, and our standard right-of-way is 66 feet wide. Our biggest roads are only 40 feet of pavement really in our neighborhoods, so even a 50-foot wide right-of-way could accommodate a much bigger road than you're going to need here, but we do a lot of other things on the right-of-way other than just pavements. This won't be designed for parking on both sides of the street, but there will have to be room for utilities and there'll have to be room for stormwater management. And I think it's very likely that 50 feet won't be adequate when the design is done and that there'll need to be some accommodations. So whether that ends up being utility or drainage easements across some of the lots or whether we need to have more right-of-way, that remains to be seen. And then 2 of the lots are slightly deficient. What our subdivision ordinance calls for is rectangles. And obviously there's not a lot of rectangles going on here. Lot 2 in Block 1 is just under 10,000 square feet. It's at 9636. And then Lot 2, Block 2 is 100 feet deep. We require 120 feet deep. The lot itself actually meets our dimensional requirements if you flipped it 90 degrees, but we call for 120 feet of depth and 75 feet of width, and this has kind of got the other thing covered instead. Those dimensional deficiencies are a lot easier to swallow than the 50-foot right-of-way one because there's adequate building space on those lots, and it doesn't really affect the density or layout of the development. But I guess I would just want everybody to have the right expectation that when the designs are done, the engineering's done on the road and the utilities, we may have to revisit some of these right-of-way dimensions or lot dimensions to accommodate what gets designed.
So if it becomes then, because it's a city road, it will be a city-maintained road?
Right.
Can we put signs where parking would be only on one side or an expectation of speed limits and things like that to assist?
Well, not only can we do it, but we can change our minds about it as we learn about how the road behaves too. And
Okay.
it'll be ours to manage in every way, so this is step 1 here of that management, make sure it gets designed and constructed appropriately. You can see the commission did vote to approve it by a 4-0 vote. And then there's just more detailed notes on all of the specific requirements in our ordinance for preliminary plat and how to, whether or not the information is provided and whether it's adequate.
So if we were to pass this tonight, where does it go from here?
If you pass this tonight, then the preliminary plat's approved. There's some pretty significant steps before the final plat could even be considered. The first one that's obvious here, there's a street vacation request that's a part of this. We'll have to handle that separately. And there is ongoing conversations between Anton and the neighbor that's affected by that we'll have to see the results of before we can move forward on a request to vacate that street. If both of the neighbors agree to it, then the vacation is a public hearing that we do notify the neighbors of, and then a simple majority of the council. If it's some other mechanism where both of the neighbors aren't in favor of it, then it would take a supermajority of the council, and since Anton's not going to be involved in that, it would be have to take 4 of you to approve it. Right away, our concern about that vacation was we just want to make sure that there's a plan to provide municipal sewer to the interior lots on the west side of 3rd Avenue, and if that's taken care of, then there's not a lot left for us to worry about in terms of access or development rights, and if both of the neighbors are okay with it, then I can see a path forward on that, but we'll have to go through the steps on it. Then Anton will have to do the actual engineering, and that'll be a conversation with the city as his engineering gets done on the road design, on the utility design, on the stormwater design. And we'll be negotiating a developer's agreement with him that talks about what he's going to build, and, the securities that we need to make sure that it gets done correctly before we take it over as a public asset.
What's the timeline on that phase? Is that this year yet, or? Don't know.
The work that I've had done already with the engineers and with the surveying, I mean, it's always hard to say. If it's 65 degrees in November, then sure. But if it's 15 below in November, then no.
Okay.
I mean, they're ready, and they've got people. They're just waiting for me to call them tomorrow, hopefully, and say go. And then they said 2-week turnaround based on the information they have already, because we've been talking about it for a long time, so it's 2 weeks on their side. And not that there won't still be other tweaks, right, once we send that off, if whoever looks at it, if it's LHB or the cities.
So in looking at this, obviously, if it were to go ahead as it is today, we really would vacate the possibility of ever constructing a 3rd Avenue West?
Yeah, this road would basically fulfill the purpose that 3rd Avenue West originally
Okay.
did.
Would
most of
2nd
it.
Avenue West ever be, I know there's a ditch there and things, would that ever be able to be built as a road?
Well, I mean,
Or
you
no?
can never say never, right? This is an engineering question, which means it's just a question of how much money is it worth.
Right.
I'm sure you could bury that if you wanted to and have room for utilities. I just can't see that ever happening. It
Okay.
doesn't seem feasible to me.
Okay.
Especially because the only people that would do it would be the city, right? And if you have a whole city block on both sides that are already built out or serviced, and the city was going to invest infrastructure dollars, I probably would vote against that as a city councilor, to say, let's go ahead and turn this already developed area of our town into, put 2 more roads in there when we already have right?
Right. Yep.
Maybe you weren't asking my comment on that, but that's,
Fine.
yeah.
I'm just trying to think in my head.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
Can I ask a question? So
Sure.
Yes.
If this goes through today, it's pretty much a done deal. So unless something comes up with engineering or whatever,
The preliminary plat's a done deal if they approve it.
can it
tonight.
ever be stopped?
The final plat, he hasn't even applied for yet, so if there was some reason that hadn't been thought about, or some problem that comes up, or that he does design work and finds out that there's actually an issue that's not feasible and he wants to do something different, there's a lot of ways that it could not happen. But when the city council passes a preliminary plat, they're basically saying, we like this design, and as long as you keep to this design for the most part, then we're going to approve the final as well. That's the message that's being sent, so.
So when is our neighborhood, the adjoining property owners, ever going to be told of what's going on in this process?
Everybody will get notified of the street vacation. Other than that, there really isn't a notification that we would do for this. So it's one of the shortfalls of our subdivision ordinance, I think, and there's a number of them, including we don't really provide Anton or his engineers with our minimum requirements for street or utilities or anything else. Our design standards are really not there. And this whole review process for the plat is kind of strange, the way that we do it. That there's a lot of deficiencies in our subdivision ordinance that it'd be nice to really take a hard look at sometime, but that's a bigger question than tonight.
It could be something presented to the planning commission though, right? If it was something like that, instead of just in conditional use permit applications or in variance applications, that surrounding property owners were notified when it would just be as simple as adding that, right? That would be
It would be, and of course, we can just notify people of this if you want us to anytime. We're spending a lot of energy right now with the planning commission at the staff level trying to get our hands around public engagement and what we do it for and to what extent and why, like what are we trying to achieve through it. And yeah, this is one of those things that just doesn't look like it fits right now. And
Well, I saw that and I don't want to get too far off task. I noticed that as you were talking about that at the planning and zoning last week. And I'm wondering, and hopefully by watching this, why or if the News Herald would pay a little bit more attention. We don't get much visibility really in the paper at all, which surprises me a little bit. So
it's
there, I said it, Brian.
Yeah. It's a nice request. It's our responsibility, though. It's not
Right.
theirs. And that even if they did great coverage, it's not going to reach everybody.
No.
And that's kind of part of the conversation that the Planning Commission's been having about a lot of issues. Is are we comfortable with our strategy for reaching everybody? And we're trying to improve that right now. So, and the newspaper will always be a part of that strategy.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was a way to get more people in on this or aware of it, just because it is such a big project. I mean, it's creating a whole new block.
Here's my
and-
question, can we delay it for 2 weeks? Is that a possibility?
You sure can. I mean,
I don't know what you
I know
think of
his
that, and
intention was to try and get something done yet this season, and that feels pretty
Tight.
tough to me. Even if you approved it tonight, I think there's a lot of ways this doesn't make progress yet this year. 2 weeks is definitely a big deal in terms of that goal, but that's not the only consideration here. So
Right.
you certainly have the right to delay it if you want to.
And if you guys feel more comfortable waiting until there's a full council, I mean, I totally get that. I thought there'd be, I didn't know that nobody else was gonna
Right.
be here tonight. In fact, yeah, I didn't know that, so. And, yeah, I mean, I want it, I want it to be as open as possible, I guess, if people have a problem with it, I guess I'm willing to listen to it and, and try and help, but as long as it gets passed, if it's in 2 weeks from now, I don't know, for the next several years, I'll be the neighbor there, right? It's a small town, I'm not doing this to,
Yeah, you're not going anywhere in 2 weeks or 2 months.
well, and I'm not
per se.
doing any of this to make, that's not my intention,
I know.
my intention is to try and find and piggyback onto work that I've already done and money that I've already spent, to try and find opportunities to try and build houses, because that's what I do for a business, and I like doing what I do.
Kind of torn.
Just table it, I don't care, that's fine, whatever. I don't need it to happen, I can
What are
do
your
it next spring.
thoughts?
I would entertain a motion. I think I have an idea of where Tim or Jay would probably come down on this.
Well, we know Tim already said yes, because he's
Mhm.
on planning and zoning.
Is the planning commission
Go ahead.
working on outreach at all, or is it just kind of been discussed as a hope?
It's been a point of emphasis on a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with this year, and increasing the amount and the ways that we do interact with the public. This is just an issue that wasn't on that list right away, and it feels kind of awkward because it's a perfect sort of issue to be dealt with that way, but
Well, how many, sorry to interrupt you, how many preliminary plats happen?
yeah, we get them every couple of years. This isn't a
Yeah.
big thing for us.
So it would make sense. I mean, I don't think it was, just because it doesn't happen very often, doesn't mean that I'm totally, I guess, on board with the public outreach. I mean, like I said, I was surprised, and, you know, and then we were trying to, yeah, I mean, when Rory and Katie showed up and they're like, we didn't get anything, I was just like, well, because I talked to him about this a year ago, but nothing had happened, you know? The same with Fritz. He's like, I thought nothing was happening, and now all of a sudden we're doing something. And I was like, well, honestly, I've been waiting for survey work, for engineering work. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and I mean, I can draw pictures, but I can't do this,
Right.
you know? So I've been waiting and waiting too, and finally it was like, if we're gonna get this thing in for the meeting, the planning commission meeting, like, here is the deadline, here is when this has to happen, and it was that window right in front, or, you know, whatever that 10-day, whatever the publication period is, you know, to call the meeting. So, anyways, it wasn't,
Go ahead, John.
Okay.
but I mean, I'll say lastly, I mean, it's fine, if you guys don't feel pressure, not from me,
No.
but I mean, even on the schedule for our season, I mean, that's, you know, so if you want more dialogue with, you know, to be able to allow more neighbors to like get letters, I mean, I guess, like, I don't know what it would change
Well,
in your opinions, but if you feel better about that, I'm not gonna,
I think we're following what's in place right now. I think Rory and Kate have a valid concern. However, you know, it's not a bar going in. There aren't going to be 10 houses, 8 houses there by the end of the year. We can't figure out what the taxes will be, what it's going to mean. I don't know if that'll happen in 4 years, if it'll happen in 2 years, if it happens in 10 years. You've got a lot to figure out and finish. So you've answered my questions. You can do what you want to do.
I would make a motion to approve Resolution 2018-16.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I think the most that we can do right now, if people are watching or see, is, you know, if they have questions, obviously, would be to contact you, to contact one of us. There's more to move through. So I think that's the best we can do, is put ourselves out there. I've had people reaching out to me. My phone number is on the website, so that people can contact me. I don't know what you get. I know you've got an email there. But, you know, I'm going to encourage people to reach out to us if that's what they want to do. I don't know how many people watch us. I know a lot of things happen at coffee shops, and I've always said that you can solve all the world's problems if you want, but if you don't come to the meetings and talk and tell us how you're feeling or what you're thinking, then we really don't know. So I'll just put it out there that people need to talk to us.
All right. Thanks you, Anton.
thank you.
Okay. So next we're moving on to a Highway 61 design process update. And
So there's a lot of paper here that can be kind of tricky to wade through. So I'll try to summarize it. This table on the back wall here that we spoke about some months ago is, there's a list on the left-hand side of all of the design elements that the transportation grant that we received could potentially be used to pay for. And there are also elements that are, you know, necessary for the successful project, including meeting all the goals that the community identified for us. Those items were not included in MnDOT's design contract with LHB that they led a couple of years ago. I think a lot of times they expect a local entity to take the lead on that, and we've been working as a partner with them to see how to get this best done. The strategy that's in front of you now is 2 contracts, but there's really a third element that I'm going to start talking about. So for those things that are on that table that the grant is eligible to pay for and that are inside of the right-of-way, MnDOT will be paying for the design work on that. That's about $120,000 worth of design work. Then there's two other categories, things that are TAP eligible, but
Out of the right of way.
out of the right of way, and then things that are just not TAP eligible at all. And MnDOT can't pay for either of those things, but we have an interest to see some of those things get designed at least while this highway construction project is going on. And so we have those three categories that are going to get paid for three different ways. One, MnDOT's just going to handle. One is an agreement that we'll have with LHB that pays for one of the categories, and then one is a contract that we'll have with at AFLA, which is CJ Fernandez, that pays for another one of those categories. So our total is about $61,600 of design work. The TAP grant is $750,000. We can use that to pay for design work, but for the things that are TAP eligible, but not for the things that aren't. More importantly, if you'll recall, when we went through that list, there's quite a bit more than $750,000 worth of potential things on there. And I think even when we cut back some of the things we decide not to do, we'll probably end up spending more than $750,000. So a safer assumption is that we'll be using our reserves that we set aside every year for special projects to pay for this money. That process is going to start next week. So the other thing is, if you'll recall, when the Creative Economies group came and talked to the council and said that they'd like to be able to advise you on aesthetic and artistic considerations and things, and this is one of the areas where they're interested in working, and you said that sounds great. They're going to work with CJ starting next week to get this design work going. So if you do approve these contracts, that it's going to start that quickly.
Have we heard whether they're really planning to start next year, or if it is going to be pushed back to 2020? Do we know?
Remember, this project goes from 3 miles west of town to all the way to 14 east of town. And they will absolutely be starting it next year. What are they going to do next year, and what are they going to do? And they're not going to finish it next year. So
No.
what are they going to do in 19 and 20 has yet to be determined. In September, towards the end of the month, we have a meeting scheduled with the steering committee that we've assembled and the MnDOT design team to talk about that very thing. Let's go through the staging plan. We've been asking MnDOT about that for a few months now. We're going to get a good crack at it at the end of September, and then we're going to turn around and start communicating again with all of the affected people in the community about what to expect and get that figured out. Right now, it seems pretty likely that 2020 is going to happen for stuff downtown more likely than 2019. But we don't know that yet. And we're going to wait and go through this discussion with them in our steering committee before we put a real big effort to get the word out to people. We want to make sure we have some good information.
Where are we getting that 60,000 amount from?
So there's a couple of different numbers in here, and they show up in multiple places. LHB has a contract with us that says 23,000, and then CJ
That's
has a
the
contract
red.
with us that says
And
38.
then Okay.
Yeah, see, we're
8,000.
23 above it.
Okay. So it's both of them.
Yeah, and in their proposals, sometimes, like, CJ had included some of LHB's number in his totals, and LHB had included some of CJ's numbers in his totals. But that's what we're talking about, is the amount of money.
And this is just the two areas, third and third, and the campground.
This pays for everything that's on that list, so
Okay.
lighting through the entire project. Well, I won't go through the list, but if anybody's interested in it, it's up there, or you can refer back to previous memos about it. There was probably $1.5 million worth of stuff that was up on that list. So one of the things we can't say right now is, well, how much are we actually going to spend on all of these things? Because we don't have a design to look at to see is that adequate, or what are we willing to spend money on. So there's placeholders that we used to just start that conversation in terms of what the budget is for these items. But it's really through this design work that we get to make decisions about what we're willing to spend the money on. And I'm sure that we're going to make some changes to what's up there. That's kind of the everything. And you can see one of the strategies was we would do it later, or we would look for additional funds to help us pay for it. And we really can't start that conversation until we have the design work done. So this is really the critical next step.
So for all that design work, our cost right now is about $61,000,
Right.
bottom line. I make a motion to approve the 2 contracts.
I will second. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next, the budget update. Let's see.
So, Tim and
Get that
Jay
on.
are not here. Otherwise, I was hoping earlier this week that we would get some conversations started about scheduling. We're looking at next week to have the department heads come sit down and talk to you. Their budget proposals are all in. We have a preliminary draft that we distributed earlier today via email. It's just kind of a summary. We'll actually be distributing the line item level budget requests to you prior to those meetings, and we'll be scheduling those. We don't have to do that tonight. It's not worth our time to talk about that tonight. So we'll be in touch with you later this week and get those times set.
It'll be daytime or evening?
Hopefully daytime.
Okay. Next week could be relatively good for me, just, you know, if you
Yeah.
get a hold of Jay and Tim.
That's
I
what
mean,
we're
not
shooting
like-
for.
Not all week, but.
I mean, daytime's better, particularly for these meetings, because we're going to have a lot of additional city staff involved and asking them to come in the evenings. You can have me, but
Yeah.
it's a lot to ask for them.
Right.
You see the numbers. I think we're in a good place to end up in a reasonable budget for next year, and we have a lot of flexibility on how we're going to do that. We sent out a list of issues as well that will be on the list of things we have to worry about. The one I'll bring up just to talk about tonight is health insurance. We had a 29% increase for 2018, so that was a huge, really difficult issue to deal with. And it's 17.5% next year. So people might ask, well, aren't we part of a pool? We are. It would have been worse if we weren't. This is just a function of our experience rating, which has not been great, and we've spent more money than our premiums have covered. So that's just the reality of it. We're meeting tomorrow with our benefit earning staff to look at some options. And I think there's some plans out there that we can at least provide some savings to our staff, not necessarily to the organization. I think we're going to be pretty well stuck with a cost here. But that doesn't mean we have to end up giving all of our benefit earning employees a pay cut because of it next year, which is one of the alternatives. All of that is subject to negotiation. We have a contract with AFSCME that includes benefits, and most of our benefit earning employees are a part of that contract. So we'll keep everybody posted on how those conversations go. If we get any interest in that, we'll certainly be involving at least Kelly and Jay in some more in-depth conversations as a personnel committee, but then the whole council will see what we're thinking about too. And then the park revenues is the other really big wild card. Last year we changed how we handled that in the budget pretty dramatically. We had been super conservative about it and just been outperforming it every year. That is a way to ensure that the levy doesn't get affected by a bad year. And then last year instead we bumped up our estimates for revenues. We added a corresponding expense and kind of a float category for special projects. But the intention was not to spend that money this year, but to wait and see. So we'll look at this year, at these meetings, we'll look at 2017 and what we had budgeted and what actually happened, and talk about how to deal with those extra monies, because there are extras, of course. But we'll also look at 2018, and we don't think that we're going to hit our number. So, that's not bad news, because our number was giant. We're still going to do better than 2017, but we might want to just dial it back a little bit for 2019 and get a little more conservative. So that's where we're at on that.
So is that it on the budget? Just get back to it next meeting. Okay. Then we have on the agenda resolution 2018-17, which is for a vacation, a portion of 6th Street.
So 6th Street is east-west running.
Mhm.
This chunk of it is north of County Road 7 and between 3rd and 4th Avenue. And it's half of the block to the east of this, half of the right-of-way is already vacated. There's no road constructed here. The two adjacent property owners both submitted a petition to vacate the portion of the right-of-way between their properties. And what this resolution does is it just says that petition is adequate, and we'll schedule a hearing where we'll actually talk about the vacation. So we don't need to talk about it tonight, but it is adequate. And then the other thing I'd say is that rather than the 26th of September, which is a meeting from a month of now where we would have been able to meet the notice requirements, that one of the adjacent owners is not available then, so they'd like us to push it back to the next meeting, which is October 10th.
I'd make a motion to accept resolution 2018-17 as amended for the meeting date.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Now we can move on to council and staff reports. Anton, anything?
Oh, I haven't had an EDA meeting since we were here last time, I think, so. I had a subcommittee meeting for the EDA yesterday. We have formed a committee on there to deal with grants and requests for money for businesses for business development and projects. And so we're working on putting together guidelines to make that a more formal thing, so it doesn't just seem willy-nilly. Yeah, that's really the only thing that I've had going on since then.
Okay. The only thing I had, Mike was there too, but we met at the Historical Society, the museum there, to discuss their wants for maritime displays or museums. They're pretty new in there as far as making up a master plan, and partially I think they were kind of gauging our interest as far as if we had ideas, suggestions, opinions, and so we just kind of went through current and upcoming city projects that may impact some of the areas around the coast that they were looking at, but ultimately we didn't want to be in charge of any of this planning, and they have engineers and architects with them, and so we just kind of said, you guys can work on your master plan idea a little bit, and then when you start flushing some things out, then they'll come back and we can take a look at it again. And so there's nothing much came out of that one, but we should hear more from them in the future.
I mean, earlier versions of that conversation were started when the Hammer boat collection was offered to the Historical Society, and they talked about where they might want to put it. And we looked at potential Boulder Park locations for a structure, and since that's city property, we're a partner in that conversation. And what would we want to see as a part of that? And we didn't get very far in those conversations, and other than to say that seems like a good spot to deal with the public restrooms issue that the council was very keen on seeing addressed, so that if somebody wanted to have a structure there, that would be something that we'd want to see a part of it. Other than that, we look at the whole Artist Point, Coast Guard property and the forest beyond it, and think with the Coast Guard talking about potentially relocating to a different place, renting housing in town, that property would come into city ownership, and we'd like to do some master planning ourselves about that whole piece, so that we get the community weigh in on what they'd like to see happen there before it becomes ours to deal with. And we'll get to that right after we get done with some of these other big things that we're doing. Assuming nothing else shows up.
Any update on golf course, where that's at, or how that's been working out with
I don't have any
Paul
updates.
Jones?
I'm meeting on Tuesday
Park
for
Board's
Park Board
Tuesday.
meeting. So,
He's been coming up there pretty regularly, taking care of the turf maintenance that requires somebody with some turf maintenance expertise. We've got great staff people that are excellent mechanics and know how to do the maintenance that's over there. It's been a godsend to have somebody like that available as just to hire, and we think we're going to be able to put the course to bed at the end of the season in much better shape than we would have hoped otherwise, which is good.
So then will we talk about, and it might be a time at budget talks about what we're going to do for hiring, or,
Yeah.
I mean, I would think the hope would be to have somebody,
and the possibility is for him to return throughout next year as well, but that's all to be discussed, I think.
okay.
So here's how I see that playing out, and I think the budget conversation is exactly the home for it. We intend to do a recruitment this year, and whether or not we decide, you want to see that as the way we're going to operate next year, I think we need to learn a little bit more about how real that is and what our options are. The budget will be built around that option, because that's the most expensive option. And then we'll also put a few other ideas on the table in terms of whether we have contract help and fill in with some other city staff, or whether, just different ways that we might staff it. And we'll look at those and decide then, what does the park board think makes the most sense, what does the city council think makes the most sense. And we don't have to figure that out. You're going to be at your next meeting setting a preliminary levy, and we'll base that, again, like I said, on the idea that we'll have a full-time benefit earning superintendent with 3 kids coming there next year, the most expensive option that we would have. And then we'll spend the next couple of months looking at different options and see if there's ones that cost less that provide us what we need.
Okay. YMCA board met last week in their separate membership committee finance. I actually wasn't able to attend. I was home sick, so I did not make it to that. I do have a couple of questions, quick things that I'm wondering about. One is when we make up our agenda, and it doesn't have to be decided tonight, but as my head plays over, there's a lot of what I'll call old business, things that we continually talk about that sometimes we leave behind. My thought is, we talked about City Hall liquor store, had our planning session, but we haven't talked much about it. Can we potentially in the future do an old business, new business, where we kind of go back, whether we say we don't have anything or just an update? I don't know if that's possible, just something I want to throw out. We don't have to figure it out here tonight.
Yeah.
I like that.
So things don't kind of fall away. I know that we have a lot.
Right.
But it's just kind of a way to keep track that if it's on the agenda, at least it's somewhere in our minds, and we might say, no, we can't deal with that for 3 months yet. That was my things. The other thing that I wanted to, and I made copies I can share with you guys here, it would probably have to go through Planning Commission. This whole issue about housing VRBOs has played in my head because of so much public input to it. One of the things, I don't even remember, someone in the community said, City of Duluth is dealing with the same issue and having trouble. And I actually went on to Duluth's website and looked at their Planning Commission minutes, and I can throw them out to you guys. I kind of highlighted what Duluth did. And just something for us to kind of read, maybe take a look at. obviously this has to go to the planning commission, and I want to share it with them. Unfortunately, Tim's not here. What they ended up passing in March came down to a percentage of ownership. They started out by numbers. They currently, I think somewhere right now, they had permitted 60 in 2017. They proposed going to 66 in 2018, 73, 2019. That isn't exactly what ended up passing, but it came down to a percentage. And I think for us, that might be something very interesting. I know it takes, will take manpower out of City Hall, but taking a look at what falls in our mixed use, what do we have for residential homes, what do we have that are probably more than likely being used as VRBO, and where's our percentage falling? I think that would be a really good start to take a look at those numbers. Again, that might be something that's Planning Commission, but I thought at least it's some way to kind of start a talk, because I know we've all been kind of going, well, what do we do with this? Where do we go? And I thought that it was very interesting that the city of Duluth is kind of going through the same growing pains as we are along the shore. So just something that I wanted to share with all of you and show you what they're talking about, and I'll get this on to Tim so that they have it.
What Tim will probably tell you is the planning commission did a pretty thorough conversation about this 2 years ago, and we did look at Duluth's information as well as a lot of other places. As a matter of fact, at that time Duluth said they had 20 licensed facilities. And we knew we had a lot more than that, so we figured maybe
Wow.
they need to read our minutes
Wow.
on this stuff.
So,
And the big difference between Duluth and ours and why we didn't move in this direction is they license the facilities and we don't.
right.
And the planning commission at least really wasn't interested in seeing the city get involved in licensing rentals or VRBOs or anything of that sort, which would be a prerequisite for us having a maximum number like this. But it's certainly something that we talked about, and it's something we could talk about again, and it's something that the city has the authority to do, if not the current infrastructure in place to do. But if that's something that the council or the planning commission wanted to look at, we could take a peek again.
That's it for me.
That's awesome.
Anything for Mike?
No, we did want to just talk about the application we received today that I sent via email, so I don't know if anybody got a chance to see this because it showed up this afternoon. We have a planning commission opening, and we have an applicant. So the planning commission opening we just brought up pretty recently because and unfortunately it was sprung upon us, and we're going to miss Michael, and thanks for his service, and right away Josh Lindstrom has stepped up and made application. So if people have had a chance to look at that and you want to talk about it tonight, we sure can.
I haven't had a chance. This is the first I've.
Yeah.
So.
Well, time's not of the essence here. We don't have a regular meeting scheduled for the first week of September because we just held one a couple weeks, or last week. So if you wanted to wait 2 weeks and have the whole council look at it and see if maybe you get other applicants or something like that, you certainly could.
Great.
Otherwise, that's it.
Anything, Kim?
No.
Nothing? All right. Meeting is adjourned. 8:12.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Night, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.